The sky was a bruised shade of lavender as Ethan Calloway steered his black Aston Martin through the winding back roads of Edenridge, a quiet little town on the outskirts of his estate. He had fled the city for peace, escaping the endless cocktail parties, fake laughter, and gold-digging socialites that clung to him like perfume. The billionaire wasn't looking for company, but fate had other plans. A flickering neon sign caught his attention. Maggie's Diner, home of the best pie in town. He pulled over. The place looked outdated, but something about its simplicity intrigued him. No paparazzi, no pressure, just peace. Or so he thought. Inside, the diner was modest. A few booths, old jukebox humming softly, and a few locals sipping coffee. And then he saw her. She was wiping down a table near the window, golden curls tied in a messy bun, her uniform slightly too big for her slender frame. Her eyes, green like spring leaves after a storm, didn't sparkle. They stared into nothing, as if they'd seen too much. And her wrists, faint purple marks peeked through her sleeves when she moved. Ethan's trained eyes missed nothing. He'd seen bruises like that before, on children rescued from abusive homes, on women too scared to speak up. But why was someone like her still here? He sat down in her section. She walked over, soft and polite. "Good evening. What can I get you?" Her voice was gentle, but there was a tremble behind it. The kind of tremble that didn't come from cold. It came from fear. Ethan didn't answer right away. His blue eyes scanned her face, catching the way she kept her gaze low, never quite meeting his. "Coffee," he said finally. "Black, and a slice of that famous pie." She nodded and walked away quickly, as though afraid of lingering too long. Moments later, as Ethan sipped his coffee, he heard raised voices. One of the drunk regulars had grabbed her wrist as she tried to clear his plate. "Come on, sweetheart. Just a little smile. What's a pretty thing like you doing working here anyway?" Lila's body froze. She tried to pull her arm away, but the man's grip tightened. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. Ethan was on his feet before she could blink. In 3 strides, he reached them. "Let go!" Ethan's voice cut through the din like a blade. The man looked up, unimpressed. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan leaned closer, his icy stare enough to sober any fool. "Someone who doesn't tolerate cowards who hurt women." The drunk scoffed, but the look in Ethan's eyes made him drop her wrist and stumble out the door. Lila clutched her arm and mumbled, "I'm sorry. He's a regular. He just gets like that sometimes." Ethan looked at her, incredulous. "That's not normal, Lila." Her name had slipped from the name tag pinned to her apron, but hearing him say it sounded strangely comforting. No one had said her name that gently in years. He sat back down, watching her silently as she brought over the pie. Her hands trembled as she placed the plate before him. "Thank you," she said, eyes flicking up for a second before dropping again. "You don't have to thank me for basic decency," he replied. "Has no one ever stood up for you before?" She didn't answer, but her silence screamed louder than words. As he finished his pie, Ethan pulled out his wallet and slipped a crisp bill under the coffee mug. "Keep the change," he said. When she returned to clear the table and saw what he'd left, a $1,000 tip, her eyes widened in disbelief. She turned to catch him before he left. "Wait, sir, this is too much." Ethan paused at the door, then looked back at her. His voice was low but steady. "No woman deserves to live in fear. Not at home, not at work, not anywhere." Lila's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not her stepmother, not her uncle, not any of the men who looked at her like she was a tool, not a person. Ethan looked at her one last time, then added, "You don't belong here, Lila." Then he walked out into the night. Lila stood frozen by the counter, her hand clutching the $1,000 bill like it was a lifeline. For the first time in years, someone had seen her, not just as a waitress, not as a burden, but as a human. And as she watched Ethan Calloway's car disappear down the road, she didn't know it yet, but her life had just changed forever. The sky wept softly as dusk settled over Edenridge, casting shadows that matched Ethan Calloway's mood. He hadn't stopped thinking about Lila since last night. The bruises, The fear in her eyes, the way she clutched that $1,000 bill like it was a miracle. It haunted him. Women like her didn't belong in a world that broke them and walked away. So he came back. But this time, he didn't enter the diner. Instead, he parked across the street, engine idling low, blue eyes locked on the door like a hawk. He had a gut feeling. Something wasn't right. Then he saw her. Lila stepped outside the diner, still in her apron, shoulders hunched, exhaustion dragging her like invisible chains. But she wasn't alone. A woman stormed after her, older, sharp-boned, with fury in her stride. Her stepmother. Ethan leaned forward, every nerve on edge. "You worthless brat," the woman hissed, grabbing Lila by the arm. "Think you're too good for us now? You think you're better just because some rich idiot gave you a fat tip?" I didn't ask for it," Lila stammered, but her voice was no match for the venom thrown at her. Then it happened. A loud smack cracked through the air. Lila's head snapped to the side. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just stood there trembling, like she'd learned to take it. Ethan's fists clenched around the steering wheel. His blood roared in his ears. This wasn't just neglect. This was abuse, and it had to end tonight. He waited until the stepmother left in a rusted pickup, dragging Lila behind her. Then, like a shadow, Ethan followed. They drove for miles through the dark, winding woods until they reached a crooked house at the edge of nowhere. Ethan parked down the road and moved silently through the trees, instincts sharp, footsteps muffled. That's when he saw it. Behind the house, near a dying tree, was a wooden shed. The stepmother yanked Lila inside like she was storing garbage, then locked the padlock on the outside. Ethan's stomach turned. She was locking her in a shed, in the cold, like an animal. Rage boiled in his chest. He didn't think. He acted. Moments later, the lock shattered under the force of a tire iron. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that would haunt him forever. Lila sat curled in a corner on a pile of hay and old coats, shivering in silence. Her cheeks were red from cold and the slap. Her lips trembled. And when she looked up and saw him, panic exploded in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "Please, don't hurt me." Ethan froze. The words tore through him like shards of glass. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently, kneeling in front of her. "I came to get you out." She didn't move, didn't trust him. Why would she? Every man in her life had taken something from her. But Ethan slowly removed his coat, wrapped it around her fragile shoulders, and offered his hand. Not to pull her, not to demand, but to invite. "Let me help you, Lila." She hesitated. Then, like a crack in ice, something inside her gave in. She placed her hand in his. It was cold, fragile, but real. He led her to the car, settled her into the heated seat, and cranked the warmth. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't speak. Her body trembled, not from the cold anymore, but from confusion. In silence, they drove for 30 minutes until his lakeside mansion came into view. The sprawling estate looked like something out of a dream, lights glowing against the dark water like safety incarnate. He parked, walked around, and opened her door. She followed him up the steps, barefoot, numb, unsure. Inside, the house was warm, filled with soft lighting, calming scents, and silence, the peaceful kind. He led her to a guest room, opened the door, and stepped back. "You can stay here," he said. "Bathroom's through there. Closet's full. Take anything you need." She stared at him, wide-eyed, arms still gripping his coat. "Why are you doing this?" His expression didn't flinch. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." Lila's throat tightened. "You want something in return, don't you?" "They all do." Ethan's jaw tensed. "The only thing I want is for you to feel safe." She blinked, stunned. The silence between them was heavy, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was disbelief. "You're not like them," she whispered. "No, Lila," he said softly, turning to leave. "I'm not." He didn't wait for gratitude, didn't expect her to trust him overnight. All he gave her was space and kindness. And as Lila stood in that beautiful room, holding onto a coat that still carried his warmth, tears finally fell. Not from pain, but from the unfamiliar touch of safety. For the first time in her life, She wasn't alone. The first morning in the mansion felt like waking inside a dream. Sunlight poured through ivory curtains, warming the soft linen sheets that cocooned Lila. For the first time in years, she hadn't been jolted awake by shouting, freezing winds, or the stench of alcohol. For the first time, there was peace. Lila sat up slowly, unsure if she was truly safe or merely hallucinating safety. Downstairs, Ethan Calloway stood at the coffee bar, sharp in a black sweater and tailored pants, his chiseled features unreadable. When she entered the room hesitantly, barefoot in a borrowed sweatshirt and leggings, his eyes flicked to her, then away. "Morning," he said, without looking up from his phone. Lila nodded quietly. She didn't know how to talk to a man like him. Handsome, refined, distant, yet magnetic. She'd grown up around men who reeked of power and abuse, not quiet control and restraint. Ethan set his phone down and gestured to the stool across from him. "We need to talk." Her heart stuttered. Was he going to ask her to leave? "I meant what I said," he continued. "You can stay here as long as you want, but I have rules." Lila sat, eyes wide, bracing herself. "3 rules," he said, holding up fingers. "First, no lies. I can handle a lot, but not dishonesty." She nodded slowly. "Second, don't go snooping around the house. My past is locked up for a reason." That made her curious, but she nodded again. "And third," he paused. This one was harder. "Don't fall in love with me." Lila blinked. "What?" He leaned back, expression guarded. "I don't do love. I've seen what it does to people. It weakens them. So don't confuse my kindness for something more." She swallowed, the sting of his words lingering like a cold wind. "I wasn't planning to." "Good." He stood and walked away, leaving her to sit with a heart already bending the rules she just agreed to. Days passed. Lila adjusted to mansion life, though she still moved like a ghost. Quiet, polite, careful not to take up too much space. But something shifted. Slowly, softly, she began to bloom. The bruises on her wrists faded, replaced with bracelets Ethan left on her dresser. She started humming when she cleaned. She laughed once, and it echoed through the halls like a sound that had been missing for years. She even gained weight, just a little, but enough that her cheeks looked full again. Ethan noticed everything. He didn't show it, but he saw the way she touched the flowers in the garden, like they were sacred. He heard her voice through the vents when she sang old jazz songs in the shower. He found himself standing outside her door some nights, not daring to knock, just listening. But feelings were dangerous, and Ethan didn't let his guard down. Not since the woman who destroyed him for money. Not since his fiancée left him the moment his father died, and the inheritance was briefly tied up. Number Ethan Calloway did not love, but Lila, she was unlike anyone. One evening, after a week of quiet companionship, Lila appeared in the kitchen wearing a flowy dress she'd found in the guest closet. Her hair was down, her face glowing from cooking heat. She turned and smiled nervously when she saw him. "I made dinner," she said, voice shaking, "just as a thank you." Ethan froze in the doorway. The table was set for 2. Real candles flickered. The scent of rosemary chicken filled the air. No one had ever done something like this for him. He sat across from her, silent. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she replied. Dinner passed with light conversation, music, her favorite books, how he designed the mansion himself. She made him laugh once. It caught them both off guard. As she reached to pour him more wine, her hand brushed his. Time stopped. Their eyes locked. The moment stretched, neither moved, until Ethan slowly pulled his hand away, a storm cloud crossing his face. "Lila," he said lowly, "don't mistake this." She looked confused. "Mistake what?" "This kindness, this warmth. I don't fall in love. That's not what this is." His voice was cold again, the wall back up. Her chest tightened. "Then why does it feel like love?" she whispered. He stood, walked away. No answer. Alone at the candlelit table, Lila sat in silence, her heart breaking a little more than she wanted to admit. And upstairs, Ethan paced his room like a man running from something he desperately wanted, but couldn't afford to want, because love to him was a trap. But Lila, she was a temptation wrapped in innocence, and she was already making him question everything. For the first time in her life, Lila Monroe began to believe in light. The shadows that once clawed at her soul had started to fade beneath the warmth of Ethan's quiet presence. In his lakeside mansion, safety had become more than just a word. It had become a feeling. But peace, as she'd learned, never lasted forever. It began with a single phone call. She had just finished watering the plants near the garden when Ethan's housekeeper handed her a burner phone someone had left at the front gate. There was no name on the screen, only a number she recognized all too well. Her uncle. Hands trembling, she answered. "Well, well," he slurred. "Living like a queen now, are we?" Lila's stomach nodded. "You think you can disappear like that?" he growled. "You think I don't know who you're with?" Her voice cracked. "Please, just leave me alone." "Oh no, darling," he sneered. "You come back tonight, or I go to the press. I tell the world your rich boyfriend's been hiding a thief, a runaway, a con artist. I'll ruin him. You owe me, Lila." She stood frozen, her breath shallow. He knew about Ethan. He knew where she was. And worse, he could destroy the only man who had ever shown her an ounce of kindness. That night, the rain poured as if the heavens themselves were mourning. Ethan was upstairs in his study, flipping through architectural sketches, unaware of the storm brewing below. Lila moved like a ghost. She packed only the essentials: jeans, a hoodie, the small bracelet Ethan had given her. She stared at the mirror one last time. The bruises long faded, but the fear, it had returned. She left a note on the pillow in soft, slanted handwriting. "Thank you for saving me, but I can't let my mess destroy you." So that when Ethan came down the next morning and saw her room empty, her bed cold, and the note folded beside a single tear-stained pillow, panic gripped him like a vice. He reread the words 3 times. His hands shook. His mind raced. Number not again. Not her. In all his years, Ethan Calloway had never felt powerless until now. Lila had cracked the shell around his heart, and her disappearance shattered what remained. Without wasting a breath, he activated the private security team he hadn't used in years. "Find her," he ordered. "Now. Use everything we've got." Within hours, they tracked her to a grim, rain-soaked alley in her old neighborhood, a place Ethan had only read about in criminal reports. And what they found turned his blood cold. Lila, curled up behind a dumpster, soaked to the bone, blood on her lip, her eyes swollen from a fresh slap. Ethan stepped out of the car like a man possessed. "Lila," he said, voice sharp but shaken. Her head snapped up. For a second, she couldn't believe it. Was he really there? "Ethan, no, you shouldn't be here. He said he'd—" But Ethan didn't let her finish. He stormed toward her, took off his coat and wrapped it around her like armor. Then he turned to the man stumbling out of the nearby liquor store, her uncle. "You!" Ethan growled, storming forward and slamming the man against the brick wall. "You ever lay a finger on her again, I'll bury you in court so deep the rats won't find you." The man cursed, spit, threatened, but Ethan was done listening. "Walk away," he warned coldly, "before I make you disappear." When Ethan turned back to Lila, her face was a mix of disbelief and pain. "You came for me," she whispered, barely audible through the rain. He touched her face gently, brushing blood from her cheek. "I told you once, Lila. You don't belong there. You never did." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But I didn't want you to get hurt," she choked. "I thought leaving was protecting you." Ethan cupped her face, eyes burning with something fierce, something dangerous. "You don't protect me from you, Lila. I'm the one who protects you." In that moment, something snapped, not in anger, but in resolve. This time, he wasn't letting her go. He swept her into his arms and carried her back to the car. No more rules, no more distance, no more pretending this wasn't real. She wasn't just a wounded girl anymore. She was his. And the next chapter of their story? It would be one no threat from the past could touch. The wind howled through the trees, and the snowflakes danced around Ethan's private mountain cabin, settling softly against the windows. Inside, the warmth from the roaring fire flickered, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Lila sat on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. The events of the last few days had blurred into a whirlwind. But in this quiet, snow-covered retreat, her heart started to find peace. Ethan was in the kitchen, his broad frame visible as he moved silently, preparing something simple but thoughtful. He wasn't saying much, but she could feel the weight of his presence behind her, as if the silence between them held more than words ever could. His footsteps paused, and she felt his eyes on her. She turned, meeting his gaze with a mix of uncertainty and longing. "Ethan," her voice trembled, uncertain of what she was about to ask. "Why did you bring me here?" He took a slow step forward, his blue eyes never leaving hers. The stoic man she had come to know seemed to fade into something softer, more vulnerable in this secluded cabin. The walls that once surrounded him, walls he'd built over years of guarding his heart, began to crumble. "I brought you here," Ethan said, his voice low but full of something raw, something she could hear in the depths of his tone. "Because I wanted to be with you. Just us. No distractions, no past, only what's real between us." Lila's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words got stuck. She was afraid, afraid of loving him, afraid of losing him, afraid of not being enough. She had been broken for so long. Who was she to deserve something as pure and raw as what he was offering? Before she could stop herself, the words spilled out. "I love you, Ethan, but I'm afraid that I'm not enough for you." Ethan's expression softened and his breath hitched. He walked toward her, closing the space between them with every step. His hand reached out to touch her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tears she hadn't even known had fallen. "You're more than enough, Lila," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "More than anyone could ever deserve." She shook her head, not believing him, not sure if she could ever believe that someone like him, someone as powerful, as accomplished, could want a girl like her. The weight of her past, the scars both visible and hidden, loomed over her. She was still just a broken girl who had no idea how to be what he needed. But Ethan, as if reading her every thought, stepped closer. He cupped her face gently, his fingertips soft against her skin. "I never believed in love," he confessed quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "Not until I met you. And now, I know what it feels like to give my heart to someone who truly deserves it." His words hit her like a wave, pulling her under, drowning her in emotion. Lila's breath caught in her throat as Ethan lowered his lips to hers, silencing the doubts, silencing her fears. The kiss wasn't urgent or possessive. It was gentle, tender, an unspoken promise, a vow that this was real. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathless, their hearts pounding in unison. Ethan whispered the words she needed to hear, his voice rough and steady. "You're mine now, Lila. You always were." Her heart fluttered in her chest as his words took root deep within her. She didn't need anything else. No more questions, no more doubts. They were finally together, finally whole. Lila's hands found his, her fingers intertwining with his strong, warm ones. "I love you," she whispered back, her voice steady now, sure. Ethan's gaze softened, his eyes full of affection and promise. He led her to the bed, wrapping her in his arms as they settled together beneath the thick blankets. The snow continued to fall outside, but inside, in the warmth of each other's embrace, they found peace. That night, as they slept entwined, it wasn't about the billionaire or the broken girl. It was about two souls who had found each other in the chaos and had finally come home. In the silence of the cabin, in the quiet of the snowstorm, Ethan held her as if he'd never let go. And for the first time in her life, Lila felt truly safe, truly loved. The moment Ethan Callaway's name hit the headlines, the storm was inevitable. It wasn't just any ordinary news, it was explosive. A rich, successful billionaire, known for his cold demeanor and wealth, had fallen in love with a waitress, someone the media had quickly labeled as too poor, too damaged. The tabloids devoured the story like vultures circling prey. Lila sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the front page of a tabloid with her name splashed across it. "Gold digger," it read. "Poor waitress snags billionaire's heart. But what's her real motive?" Her heart pounded in her chest as she skimmed the article, each word cutting deeper than the last. The media had spun their own narrative, one that didn't even begin to resemble the truth. They twisted her story, twisting every aspect of her life into something vile and unrecognizable. The lies flooded her past, her family, her struggles, all laid bare for the world to see. It was humiliating. She could barely breathe. It wasn't just the press. It was the mocking eyes of people who didn't know her, who would never know her. Her stomach churned with a mix of anger and shame. What would they say about her? How could Ethan stand by her now? The paparazzi weren't just lurking outside the mansion. They were camped at every entrance, snapping photos at every angle. Lila couldn't escape their unrelenting glare. She could hear their whispers outside the windows, their cameras flashing through the panes like 1,000 thunderclaps. She didn't know how much longer she could take it. She felt like a spectacle, something to be gawked at, dissected, and mocked. Her thoughts swirled in chaos. Ethan, her rock, was being torn apart in the public eye because of her. The guilt gripped her, tightening around her chest. She wanted to leave. She had to leave. She couldn't let him lose everything for her. It wasn't fair to him. As she walked toward the front door, her hand trembling, Ethan appeared in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were full of something unspoken. He stood tall, his jaw set in determination. He knew what was coming. "Ethan," Lila whispered, her voice breaking, "you have to let me go. The media, this whole thing, it's too much. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve me. I can't let you lose everything because of me." Her words hit him like a blow, and for a moment there was silence. He didn't say anything at first, and for a heartbeat, Lila wondered if he would let her go, if he would agree with her. But then, without a word, Ethan stepped toward her, his expression hardening with resolve. His hand reached out, brushing against hers. His touch was steady, unwavering. He pulled her gently but firmly toward him. "No," he said simply, his voice a calm storm of authority. "I'm not letting you go." Lila looked at him in confusion, her heart racing. "But Ethan, the press—" "I don't care about the press," he interrupted, his voice rising with intensity. "They can say whatever they want. You are not my charity, Lila. You are my choice, and no one, not even the media, gets to decide who I love." Lila's breath caught in her throat. She searched his eyes, looking for any sign that this was a lie, a fleeting moment of defiance. But there was nothing but conviction, nothing but truth. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't know what you're doing to yourself. This is madness." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Ethan replied, "and I don't care about their opinions. I care about you. I've always cared about you. And soon—" He paused, stepping closer to her, lowering his voice. "Soon you'll be my wife." The words were like a wave crashing over her, overwhelming in their intensity. Lila felt a rush of emotions, too many to process. The weight of his declaration hit her like an avalanche, pushing aside all of her doubts and fears. Ethan was choosing her, despite everything, despite the world, despite what the media said. Before she could say anything, Ethan turned to face the cameras outside. He walked out onto the front porch of the mansion, his stride confident, unshaken. The flashes of the paparazzi grew louder, the clicking cameras a constant barrage. Lila followed him, still in a daze. Ethan took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers in a firm grip. The cameras began to click furiously, their lenses capturing every moment. With every flash, Ethan stood taller. His voice rang out loud and clear to the world, to every person watching. "This woman," he declared, "is not my charity. She is my choice, and soon she'll be my wife." The cameras went silent for a moment. Lila's heart stopped in her chest. Was this real? Did he mean it? Lila's legs buckled beneath her, and before she could catch her breath, the world around her spun. Everything blurred as she collapsed, fainting in shock. Ethan's arms were around her instantly, lifting her gently. His touch was like a lifeline, pulling her out of the chaos, away from the storm of flashing lights and harsh whispers. The media was momentarily stunned into silence, But within moments, the news broke across the internet. Social media exploded, the comments flooded in, some skeptical, others filled with support. But it didn't matter. Ethan Callaway had chosen Lila Monroe, not because of her past, not because of the media, but because he loved her. And for the first time in her life, Lila knew that she was enough. She had always been enough, for him. The autumn breeze whispered through the trees, their leaves turning shades of gold and crimson, as if nature itself were celebrating the union about to take place. Ethan Callaway stood at the altar, his heart racing with anticipation. The elegant estate was transformed into a scene straight out of a dream. Everything was perfect, but none of it compared to the moment he would see her, Lila, walking toward him. As the music swelled, Lila appeared at the end of the aisle, her beauty radiating in a gown designed specifically for her by Ethan himself. Every stitch, every detail was a testament to his love, his devotion. The fabric shimmered under the sunlight, the delicate lace hugging her figure in all the right places, while her hair cascaded in soft waves around her face. Her eyes, the same ones that had once been dimmed with pain, now sparkled with joy and hope. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anyone more breathtaking. His heart felt as if it were about to burst. The woman who had once walked through life with fear and sorrow was now walking toward him, toward a future they would build together. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. As she reached him, Lila placed her hand in his and the crowd seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them. The weight of their pasts, the years of hardship and suffering, had melted away. The future stood before them, clear and full of promise. The vows were exchanged, but it was Ethan's words that left a mark on Lila's soul. He gazed at her with raw emotion, his voice trembling as he spoke. "You don't belong in pain. You belong with me, forever." Her eyes filled with tears, the depth of his love overwhelming her. There was no more fear, no more doubt, only love. And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, the world seemed to stand still. The kiss wasn't just the seal of a marriage, it was the promise of forever, of healing, of a life filled with love that would never waver. Lila's heart swelled as she realized that, despite everything, she had found her place in the world. She had found home in Ethan's arms, and nothing would ever take that away. As they stood together, hands intertwined, the camera panned out over the golden fields surrounding the estate. The world had changed for them both. The girl who had once been torn down by life's cruelest hands now stood as the queen of a life built not on money, but on love. And with Ethan by her side, Lila knew that no matter what the future held, their love would be the one thing that remained constant, unwavering, and true, forever as promised.